Welcome to Middleton Community United Church of Christ. Good morning. My name is the Reverend Zayna Thomley. My pronouns are she, hers, and I am so glad that you have chosen to worship with us this morning. I hope that you will let us know that you're worshiping with us today. You can do that through our digital friendship pad and by scanning this QR code if you're at home or in the sanctuary. So friends, let us prepare our hearts for worship this morning as we continue to hear the story of Peter and his relationship and view of Jesus through this Lenten season. I invite you to hear this poem from the Reverend Sarah Speed, Teach Me. Teach me about the ways of the wind, about the ways of the world, about the ways of the heart. Teach me about the soft crook of my lover's arm and the way two souls can hold each other close. Teach me about forgiveness in the language of I'm sorry and the softness of sincerity. Teach me about abundance, about 70 times 7 and all the days of my life. Teach me about joy and its contagious weaving and its soul healing. Teach me about mercy, about open hands and deep breaths. Teach me about the dawn of time and the stars in the sky. Teach me what matters most. Teach me what is mine to do. Teach this achingly curious heart until I run out of questions or I run out of days. Teach me some melodious sonnet, and I will have a life well lived.
We have two readings today. The first is from the book of Psalms, chapter 119, verses 9 to 16, and can be found on page 627 in your Pew Bible. How can young people keep their way pure? By guarding it according to your word. With my whole heart I seek you. Do not let me stray from your commandments. I treasure your word in my heart so that I may not sin against you. Blessed are you, O Lord. Teach me your statutes. With my lips I declare all the ordinances of your mouth. I delight in the way of your decrees as much as in all riches. I will meditate on your precepts and fix my eyes on your ways. I will delight in your statutes. I will not forget your word. Our second reading comes from Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 to 22, and can be found on page 20 of the New Testament in your Pew Bible. If your brother or sister sins against you, go and point out the fault when the two of you are alone. If you are listened to, you have regained that one. But if you are not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If that person refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. Then Peter came to him and said, Lord, if my brother or sister sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times? Jesus said to him, not 7 times, but I tell you, 77 times. This is the good news. Thanks be to God.
Hearts open, minds awake, change us now for heaven's sake. Leave us not alone in hatred's wake. Show us how to love, show us how to love. Show us how to love. Hearts open, souls awake, rules we made we now must break, with our very own lives at stake. We must learn to love. We must learn to love. We must learn. We must learn to love. Eyes open, shocked awake, much to learn from our mistakes. Draw us closer in our heartache. Show us how to love. Show us how to love. Show us how. Show us how to love. Show us how to love. Show us how to love. Show us how. Show us how to love.
Those of you who were here 3 weeks ago when I was last standing in this pulpit might remember that I asked you what the shortest verse of the Bible was. Do you remember that 3 weeks ago? And what was one answer? Jesus wept. And what was the other one I suggested? Well, there's the other one is rejoice always, which is only 2 words, right? So they're tied. Just different emotions. Jesus wept, certainly on occasions that were important and sorrowful, and to rejoice always, which was Paul's teaching. Each of them are comforting in a way, reminding us of the presence of God. I love the opening video, which reminds us similarly, your love is here and greater than our doubts. There's another bit of Bible trivia. What's the longest psalm? The one that we read today, Psalm 119, is 176 verses. It's a good thing they didn't choose all of those for our lectionary reading today, or the theme reading. The writer, possibly King David, Shepherd David, was being really creative when he put that one together. He probably had some time on his hands. I imagine he wrote it while he was out in the wilderness watching over the sheep. Because he knew the Hebrew alphabet. The language had 22 letters, 22 consonants. So 22 consonants, he started stanzas of 8 verses, each verse each stanza starting with one of those letters. So 8 verses of 22 consonants, 8 stanzas of 22 is 176. Bible trivia. But the psalm itself is a wonderful psalm. It speaks of the transformative power of God's word, even in times of affliction and struggle, and that we find God's presence and take the pleasure of God's guidance and teachings. That text was paired with the one in Matthew's gospel, in which we get some practical guidance on the process of being sinned against and forgiving. All of the prayers that we've read together today, the readings and prayers, including the prayer of confession, wove the themes together. The value of seeking God with questions, being lifelong learners, being curious. And the prayer of confession said, forgive us for the times when we fail to be curious, when we assume we know best, when we think we're done with learning. Today's theme, Teach Me, celebrates learning with a focus on that question of Peter about forgiveness. And earlier in the service, we stated God's abundant grace and forgiveness is assured and granted to us. So which way to go with this message? Learning, forgiveness, or maybe a little bit of both? Some years ago, I've got to turn this on. I was driving on Willie Street, and I was near a pet store, and they had a chalkboard out on the sidewalk, and this was written on the chalkboard. I respect faith, but it's doubt that gets you an education. I had to do a little research. A fellow by the name of Wilson Meisner, 19th century, early 20th century, who was a playwright and also a man who liked to come up with sayings like this, put this together. Doubt engages our minds. When we have questions, we think about them, we engage our brains. When we have problems, questions, and we allow them to take us as far as we might go, they may take us to darker places or confusion. The word education means literally to lead out. To get out there in the world, to be led forward, formed and guided by what we know and by what others know, a process of learning. Too much doubt can bring the danger of meaninglessness, aimlessness, and maybe unsettling uncertainty. So I thought, well, there must be a corollary to this statement. I respect faith, but it's doubt that gets you an education. I respect doubt, but it's faith that gives you a foundation. How's that? Faith gives us the confidence to take risks and to meet challenges in our questioning and in our doubting. The very word confidence is 2 Latin words, con, with, and fideo, faith. Confideo, with faith. Confidence. Faith gives us confidence to engage different questions in the context of God's love. We gather a confidence in ourselves. We find confidence in our loving communities of faith. We find confidence in our passions for bringing healing into the world, knowing that we're partners with God. All of these are gifts of faith. So I think that's what's going on with the scripture in Matthew today. So you got the basic outline already. If someone sins against us, go and point the fault out to that person alone. If nothing comes of that, find 1 or 2 other people and have a conversation all together. If that person refuses to listen, we'll go to the church itself and bring in a larger community. And if the person is not even amenable to that, well, then let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. But what does that mean? Because Jesus welcomed tax collectors. He called one, Matthew, right? This is where we read the story. And Gentiles, people who are other. So they're not completely banished from the community. There's that sense of still we're connected together. And then Peter says, well, Lord, if they sin against me, how often should I forgive? Today's focus image was something that I originally looked at just on a computer screen, and it was quite small. And there's some details, if you look at this image now, in the largeness of the screen. This is provided by Lauren Wright Pittman to illustrate Jesus' teachings on this process for engaging conflict. Now, it took me a while to appreciate the image, but it gave me some insight into what's going on. If we go close up, all those dots confuse me. Well, those are heads, right? And you see the arms and the hands. And if you go further to the center, you see around the center figure, you see people shaking hands or taking hands together. It's almost like a dance of sin and forgiveness. Now, Jesus, just as art can help us understand something about the passage, we also need to understand something about its context. Jesus provided this teaching at Galilee. He and the disciples were there, and it's probably timed just like this Sunday, a week before Palm Sunday, and 2 weeks before the crucifixion and the celebration of resurrection on Easter Sunday. Jesus taught about the abundance of forgiveness in the last 2 weeks of his life. They are going to make a journey from Galilee to Jerusalem. And when they arrive in Jerusalem, this is what they find. This is a scale model of what Jerusalem looked like in the first century during this time, and it's you see the temple to the left and the large courtyard, the inner sanctuary, the inner courtyard, and the outer courtyard, and you see that very large structure to the right of it. That's the Antonio Fortress. When we think of the temple in our minds, we think of this beautiful building, which it was, all there in its isolation where people came to worship and offer sacrifices. The Romans set up this huge fort right next to the temple so they could control everything that was happening. They asserted their domination. It was here where Jesus was taken when he was arrested later in our story. It was there where Jesus was tortured. It was there where Jesus was given his cross and started the journey through the city to Golgotha, to Mount Calvary. It was in this place at the temple where Jesus would go on Palm Sunday after his entrance into the city. And what did he do? His first act was to overturn the tables. We'll see that story, I think it's next week. Throwing over the tables of the money changers at the temple and said, "You've made the house of God a den of thieves." We have to understand something about temple theology at this time, and that was sin and forgiveness. To go back to our main theme, sin and forgiveness were absolved if you bought animals, killed the animals, and did your rituals of seeking forgiveness in that way. Marcus Borg, who many of you have read or studied over the years, wrote how temple theology claimed an institutional monopoly on the forgiveness of sins. Various scholars of this time period point out that it was a huge financial operation because people were buying animals every day. They were slaughtering the animals, they were having their rituals, and there were people, the priests and the Sadducees, who were also exchanging money from people coming in from other places. It was a huge operation, a financial business. It was a source of great wealth for the priests. Part of the process was that you brought the animals, and the priests and their families could eat the meat. But there was so much meat that they could sell it. And so it was also the local meat market at the temple. There was also a huge custodial crew to clean up. This was the system of seeking forgiveness for sins. Amos and at least 4 other biblical prophets condemned the system and said this has to change. Jesus followed their lead. So, with all of this background, what's the so what? What Jesus is saying is that forgiveness is local. Forgiveness is in community. We don't have to go there to this place and be engaged in this system to get right with God and with one another. We can simply do that together. So that process of being wronged and seeking a conversation is completely different from buying an animal and killing it and following all of that. Jesus was teaching about replacing the system with a new process for forgiveness, giving authority to the learning community. After Jesus lined out that process, what was Peter's question? His question wasn't about the process at all, right? The question wasn't about, no, he knew, Peter knew, the disciples knew that they're replacing this system. A system that made no sense to them. And Peter actually understands because when he asks the question, how often should I forgive? He knows the answers, right? He says 7 times, right? He's got it. He's figured it out. And Jesus just adds a little bit more, right? The abundance of forgiveness, 77 times. So forgiveness is a local process gathering with 2 or 3 people with the assurance that Christ is also there, with fairness to hear different sides of the problem, and inviting the wider community to join in the struggle of finding some resolution. Rather than retaliate in anger when we are wronged, we're invited to address it together. Rather than focus on anger and betrayal and loss, we can focus on the loss of relationship. Sin means something is broken, and that means grief and sorrow when we are wronged, right? 3 weeks ago, when I talked about the 2 shortest verses in the Bible, I also acknowledged the sudden deaths in the community by gun violence. And I suggested the wisdom of the book when bad things happen to good people, where the rabbi says the better question is not why, and think of that in the context of sin, not so much why, but what now. What now is a better question to get us unstuck in losses of any kind, sinning and being sinned against. For Jesus, it's a paradox. In the midst of grief and loss and betrayal, abundant forgiveness and a process for getting there is the what now that moves us forward on the road to healing. Doubt and questions move us forward. Our experience of sin and forgiveness might also offer us a chance to move forward. A foundation of faith brings the assurance of a community of support and of God's abundant love, God's generous love, in our struggles to free ourselves from sin and to both accept and grant forgiveness. It's like a mandala. Whoop. Well, before we sing the hymn, sorry, I wanted to close just with one line of our 176 verses of Psalm 119. Even though I may stray like a lost sheep, this is the last verse. Even though I may stray like a lost sheep, seek me out, Lord, for I never forget your teachings.
We have a few announcements for the community today. We're going to begin by inviting Janet Coughlin to come on up. She is a member of our Board of Missions and Stewardship, and she is going to share a little bit of news and celebration about some of the work that's been happening here.
Yeah, so I'm often up here asking for help. Well, today this is just a thank you and a celebration. And but I'd like to start out with a question. I heard this a week ago, and there is a very large unhoused population of people in Dane County. So think about, what do you think the average age is of the unhoused person in Dane County? The average age. 9. 9 is the average age. Well, because of your generosity, your time, your talent, your financial contributions, we're going to be able to help one family with children to achieve stable housing over the course of 3 years. So this is through the Heart Room program. You've probably heard about it before because we've been hearing about and talking about Heart Room for almost a year now. But just to make sure that all of us know what we're doing, the Heart Room is a program that creates stable housing for families in our community by combining 3 years of rental assistance with flexible and family-driven support services. It's a partnership. Orchard started at Orchard Ridge. We are now joining in to this program. We're helping to fund rental assistance. The Road Home provides housing and administrative support. Dane County Joining Forces for Families assists with employment needs. And there's an early childhood initiative which focuses on children and success. So what did we do? Well, starting this fall, there was a Thanksgiving offering of $1,379 for this program. Then there was a fair trade sale. And the total amount of money that came from the fair trade sale was $6,843. But a lot of that went to the artisans who needed the money to support their living. Our profit was $2,337. Pie auction, profit $2,398. And then there was $2,000 from the Board of Mission and Stewardship budget that went to this, a total of $8,000 for the first year. Now, it's not just financial contribution. The fair trade sale, there were people who did ordering, setup, glass making, selling, and buying. Pie auction, people baked pies, people brought pies, people bought pies. That was just amazing. So due to all of that, we're going to be able to, we've achieved our first year goal to begin supporting a family in the Heart Room. And because of your generosity of time, talent, and financial contribution, the BOMS Board of Missions and Stewardship is confident that we're going to be able to continue to support one family for 3 years, and there will be at least one fewer child in that unhoused segment. So thank you and congratulations. You are wonderful.
Thank you. Continued announcements. So if you are interested in hosting, for every once in a while we have to announce this because people get good at signing up and then they forget. If you're interested in hosting coffee hour after worship, it's a really wonderful and easy way to contribute to our community here. You can sign this QR code, or there's a clipboard on the table where the treats are served. If you've never done it before, let somebody know who's serving, and they can help connect you with somebody who might help you your first Sunday to teach you how to make coffee and that kind of stuff. But it's a really wonderful and easy way to sign up. So your help would be appreciated. Today is our coffee house at 3 p.m. here in the sanctuary at MCC. There is an excellent lineup, from what I understand. Lots of fun. So please come and listen to those who will be performing. I'm told there's probably not going to be bagpipe, guitar, duet. Oh, and apparently there is some big sports ball event, and there will be updates on the game throughout the gathering. Just so you know, that they did not check our schedule before scheduling that game. And then we are coming up quickly on Palm Sunday and Holy Week. Holy Week here at MCC will be marked on Thursday evening with dinner church from 6 to 8. So we will gather around tables here in the sanctuary to share a meal together that is surrounded by worship. So we will worship together. We will tell the story of Jesus' last week before crucifixion and the resurrection, and sing together and pray together. And it'll be a beautiful experience. So I hope that you join us. RSVPs are not required, but it is helpful when we are planning a meal. So if you're going to come and could sign up, that would be great. There's also a physical sign-up sheet out on the table in Fellowship Hall. There's also a sign-up sheet out in Fellowship Hall if you wanted to contribute to that meal. It's a simple meal of bread and soup, and if you wanted to make some soup or bring some bread in, go ahead and sign up there as well. And then one final chance to join the celebration singers who will be singing on Easter. It's not too late to join. It's that easy of a song to learn. So you can come into the sanctuary right after worship today, stick around and learn that song with Deb and be prepared to join the choir on Sunday morning. Thank you to everybody who continues to be so generous here in this community, whether it is supporting things like the Heart Room or the ongoing operations of our congregation. You can give to Middleton Community Church by going to our website and finding the yellow donate button, or by giving a physical offering. There are offering boxes as you leave this room right on the other side of the wall. But I am grateful for the generosity that is known in this place. So let us stand and sing our closing song, verses 1, 3, and 5 of Amazing Grace.
As we leave this worship time and this worship space, hear these words. Beloved wanderer, as you leave this place, may you carry your curious heart on your sleeve. May you look for God in every face. May you find the courage to get out of the boat, to run to the tomb, and to speak of your faith. And when the world falls apart, may you hear God's voice deep within, saying, "Take heart. It is I, be not afraid." You are called, you are blessed. In both your ups and downs, you always belong to God. Go now in peace. Go trusting that good news. Amen.